Ethan had always dreamed of something bigger. He wasn't born into royalty, and he certainly wasn't the strongest fighter in the galaxy. But he was human, and that alone had kept him alive in a universe where most species looked down on his kind. Now, as he stood in front of the towering palace of the Galactic Emperor, he couldn't help but feel like a tiny speck in the vastness of space. The Emperor's palace was grander than anything he had ever seen. It stood tall, with spires reaching toward the stars, and its walls shimmered with golden light. Ethan was just one of many soldiers who had come from Earth, sent to assist in the Empire's defense against a growing threat. But Ethan wasn't just any soldier. He had a reputation for thinking outside the box and surviving when others couldn't. It was this skill that had earned him an audience with the Emperor. As Ethan walked through the palace halls, he could feel the eyes of the palace guards on him. They didn't trust humans, and why would they? The galaxy's many species saw humans as weak and unimportant. They couldn't match the strength or agility of most alien races. But what humans lacked in raw power, they made up for in cleverness and perseverance. The Emperor's 3 daughters were famous throughout the galaxy. Leah, the oldest, was known for her beauty and strength. She had the look of someone who could command armies. Ala, the middle daughter, was a brilliant strategist with a sharp mind and a cunning spirit. Nira, the youngest, was fierce, independent, and quick-tempered, with a charm that could win anyone over. All 3 were powerful in their own ways. All 3 had been trained to rule one day. Ethan had heard stories about them, stories of how they had led entire battalions and made critical decisions in galactic wars. They were legends. Now, he was about to meet them. The Emperor. An imposing figure with sharp features and a crown that seemed to glow with the weight of authority stood before him. His daughters were beside him, watching closely. Human, the Emperor's voice was deep, his tone hard as stone. You claim to have the skills to be of value to my empire. But tell me, what can someone like you offer us? If your people are not known for their strength or their speed, Ethan didn't flinch. He had been prepared for this moment. I may not be the strongest, he said, his voice steady, but I am resourceful. Can think quickly in situations where others would falter. Have survived through cleverness and determination, not brute force. And I'm here to prove that. The Emperor raised an eyebrow, clearly not impressed. The daughters, however, exchanged glances. They were curious, but not convinced. You may be clever, human, Leia spoke, her voice smooth but cold. But that doesn't change the fact that you're out of your league. The galaxy has seen many races come and go. None have ever been able to match our strength, Ella added. What makes you think you're any different? We've seen humans before. They're nothing special. Ethan stood tall, trying not to show how their words stung. He knew he wasn't the best at anything physical. He couldn't match the strength of the Emperor's daughters, but he had a mind that was always analyzing, always calculating. It wasn't strength that made a person powerful, it was how they used what they had. I'm not here to prove that. I'm better than you, Ethan said, meeting their eyes one by one. I'm here to show you that we humans have something you can't overlook. Leia scoffed. And what would that be? Some trick up your sleeve? The galaxy has seen plenty of tricks. Human. I think you'll see soon enough, Ethan replied quietly. The Emperor watched the exchange with a knowing look. Very well, human. If you think you can prove your worth, I will allow you to train under my daughters. You will face the challenges they face, and you will be tested. Ethan nodded, though inside his heart raced. He knew the training would be brutal. The Emperor's daughters were renowned for their strength, intelligence, and combat skills. If Ethan was going to make them respect him, he would have to give everything he had. As he left the Emperor's throne room, he could feel the eyes of the daughters on him, cold and calculating. They had already made up their minds about him. To them, he was just another weak human who didn't belong. But Ethan wasn't going to let that stop him. He would show them what humans were capable of. In the following days, Ethan was put through a series of tests, each one harder than the last. The Emperor's daughters, though skeptical, oversaw the training. They were not gentle in their assessments. Leia tested his strength in hand-to-hand combat. Ayla made him strategize through complex battle simulations. Nira threw him into situations that tested his quick thinking and ability to adapt. At first, he struggled. His muscles weren't as strong as theirs, and his reflexes weren't as fast. But he never gave up. He failed, he tried again. And when he made a mistake, he learned from it. Slowly, the Emperor's daughters began to take notice. Nura, who had once laughed at the idea of a human keeping up with her, now watched him with a mix of curiosity and respect. La, who had once doubted his intelligence, began to see how quickly he could adapt to new strategies. And Laia, who had dismissed him as a non-threat, started to understand that there was more to Ethan than met the eye. But despite their growing respect for him, daughters remained cold and distant. They were still unsure whether he truly had what it took to earn their respect. Ethan, however, wasn't about to give up. He knew that if he wanted to change their minds, he would have to do something they would never expect, and that something was going to take everything he had. The days in the palace were long and full of challenges. Ethan was pushed to his limits by the Emperor's daughters. Each day, they tested him in ways he'd never imagined. They were relentless in their training, each one believing that humans were weak and would soon give up. But Ethan never did. He refused to quit, no matter how hard the tests became. In the first few days, Ethan struggled. His strength wasn't like theirs, and his reflexes were slower. Laia, the oldest daughter, had unmatched speed and power. She threw him to the ground every time they sparred. La, the middle daughter, would challenge him with complex problems that required quick thinking, yet he sometimes faltered under pressure. Nira, the youngest, was fierce, and her energy seemed endless. She would mock him as he struggled to keep up, laughing at how slow he seemed compared to her. "You can't keep up with us, human," Nira teased one morning after another defeat. "You're only here because the Emperor feels sorry for you." Ethan clenched his fists but said nothing. He knew it wasn't about winning the sparring matches or solving every challenge perfectly. It was about proving that he belonged, that humans had something valuable to offer. He couldn't win by fighting their strength with strength, but he could fight back with something they didn't expect: his mind. The next day, the training session was different. Instead of facing them in combat, the Emperor's daughters put Ethan through a battle simulation. They were to protect a convoy from enemy ships, and they each took command of different parts of the mission. Ethan was given a small squad too, led, and he immediately felt the pressure. "You're in charge of them?" Alice said, her tone challenging. "Don't make us regret it." Ethan didn't hesitate, studied the simulation, and quickly came up with a plan. While the others rushed into battle, Ethan had his squad take a different route, avoiding the enemy's main force. He knew the enemy would expect a direct confrontation. But Ethan had noticed a weakness in their defense, a gap in their communication lines. Instead of charging headfirst, he directed his squad to cut off their reinforcements. The daughters were shocked when Ethan's strategy worked. The enemy's defenses collapsed as they struggled to reorganize after losing their communication lines. His squad was able to secure the convoy with minimal casualties, and the battle ended in their favor. Ala raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Not bad, human," she said, a hint of respect in her voice. The next challenge came the following week. The Emperor wanted to see how Ethan would perform in hand-to-hand combat. Ethan had been training hard, but he knew he wasn't as fast or as strong. As the Emperor's daughters, still, he had learned to use his size to his advantage. When it was his turn to spar with Leah, the strongest of the three daughters, he knew he had to be quick and clever. The fight started, and Ethan moved fast, dodging Leah's powerful punches and kicks. He had learned to read her movements, anticipating her next move. He was smaller than her, but he was agile. Laia was fast, but he used her momentum against her, getting her into a hold she couldn't escape. For the first time, Laia looked surprised. "How did you—" she started, but Ethan quickly released her, not wanting to hurt her. "I told you," Ethan said with a grin. "Humans have our ways." Leah smiled faintly, an expression she rarely wore. "You may not have our strength," she said, "but you certainly have a mind that's hard to ignore." Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride at her words. It wasn't a victory he had won through force, but through strategy and patience. And for the first time, one of the Emperor's daughters saw him as more than just a human. She saw him as a worthy opponent. But not all of the Emperor's daughters were so easily impressed. Nira was still skeptical. "It's just a fluke," she muttered one evening. "You got lucky." Ethan didn't argue. He knew it wasn't luck. But he also knew that he would have to keep proving himself every single day. He couldn't afford to stop. If he did, they would go back to thinking of him as weak and useless. Over the next few weeks, Ethan continued to prove himself in different ways. He helped Alla with strategic planning, providing fresh ideas that even she hadn't thought of. He learned new combat techniques from Leah, using his speed and agility to outmaneuver her at times. And Nira, though still resistant, started to rely on him during some of their tougher training sessions. She was beginning to see that Ethan wasn't like the other humans she had met. He wasn't just a weak soldier, he was someone who could make a real difference. But despite all the progress, the daughters remained distant, emotionally speaking. They were still royalty, and Ethan was still a human. The gap between them was vast, and it seemed impossible that they could ever see him as an equal in the way they saw each other. They were powerful, and he was just one human soldier. One night, as Ethan walked through the palace gardens, he found himself deep in thought. He had come so far, but there was still so much more to prove. His heart ached with the realization that no matter how hard he tried, he might never truly be accepted by the Emperor's daughters. The challenge ahead of him felt impossible, yet the fire inside him refused to go out. "Still thinking human?" Nira's voice startled him, and he turned to see her standing there, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I can't help it," Ethan admitted. "I have to prove them wrong. I have to show them I belong." Nira's eyes softened, just a little. "You're doing fine, Ethan. Better than fine. But don't think it'll be easy. You don't easily accept anything that's not perfect." "I don't need perfection," Ethan said quietly. "I just need to show them what I'm capable of." Nira didn't say anything for a moment, just watched him. Finally, she spoke. "Maybe you're right. Maybe there's more to you than I thought." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan with the thought that perhaps, just perhaps, he was beginning to earn their respect. The days following Ethan's victory over Leah in hand-to-hand combat were filled with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The Emperor had been watching closely, and Ethan knew that his tests weren't over. In fact, it seemed as though they were just beginning. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling training session, the Emperor summoned Ethan and his daughters to the Grand Hall. Ethan stood among them, his heart pounding in his chest. Emperor's expression was unreadable, his eyes fixed on Ethan as he spoke. "Human." The Emperor began, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "There is a threat growing near the borders of our empire. A fleet of hostile alien ships is on the move, and they are advancing faster than we can prepare." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had heard rumors of an alien race called the Varkians, ruthless and violent beings who showed no mercy to those who stood in their way. No one had been able to stop them before. The Emperor's eyes shifted to his daughters. "I am sending you, Laya, Ayla, and Nira, to lead a mission to defend our empire's borders, but you will not go alone. Be accompanied by this human," the Emperor said. Motioning to Ethan, the Emperor's daughters exchanged surprised glances. Leah, the oldest, was the first to speak. "Father, are you sure about this? A human fighting alongside us? He's not ready for something of this scale." Ethan could see the doubt in Leah's eyes, but the Emperor remained firm. "I believe. The human has more potential than you think," the Emperor replied, his voice cold and commanding. "The enemy will not care about your differences. It will only care about how strong you are. If he can help us win, he will prove his worth." With that, the Emperor dismissed them, and the daughters reluctantly agreed to the mission.
Ethan
Couldn't help but feel a surge of determination. This was his chance to prove once and for all that humans had something valuable to offer. The next day, the group gathered in the royal armory, preparing for the mission ahead. Ethan had been given a basic set of armor, not as advanced as the Emperor's daughter's suits, but enough to protect him in battle. As he stood with them, he could feel the weight of their eyes on him. They were still unsure whether he belonged there, but Ethan had learned that actions spoke louder than words. The journey to the borders was long and tense. The ship they traveled in was sleek and fast, designed to withstand any kind of attack. Leah, Ala, and Nira took turns watching the scanners, tracking the approaching fleet. The tension among them was palpable. No one spoke much, each of them lost in their thoughts about the battle ahead. As they approached the enemy fleet, Ethan's nerves grew. The Varkians were known for their brutal tactics. They would attack without warning, using overwhelming force to break through defenses. Ethan's mind raced. He wasn't a military commander, but he had learned a lot from the training with the Emperor's daughters. He knew that he had to be clever to help them succeed. Allah broke the silence. The enemy is closing in. We'll have to fight them head on. Nira's eyes were focused, determined. We don't have the numbers to win. That way, we'll need to outsmart them. Ethan nodded. What if we use their strength against them? If we can lure them into a trap, we can destroy their command ship. Take out the leader, and the rest will fall apart. Thaya looked at him, surprised. By his suggestion, you think that will work? I do, Ethan replied. It's a risk, but it's the best chance we've got. After a tense moment, Leah gave a nod of approval. We'll give it a try. The battle began shortly after. The Varkian fleet appeared on the horizon, and the human team quickly prepared. For the fight, alien ships were massive, their weapons designed to tear through any kind of defense. Ethan watched as Leia and Ayla took command, coordinating the fleet's movements with precise efficiency. The strategy Ethan had suggested was risky. They would need to draw the enemy into a narrow corridor between two asteroid fields, where their larger ships would have a hard time maneuvering. But Ethan had a plan for that too. He knew that the key was to disrupt the enemy's communication and leadership, causing confusion among their ranks. As they neared the asteroid field, Ethan's pulse quickened. The enemy ships were closing in, and the pressure was mounting. He could feel the heat of the moment, but he focused on the plan they had laid out. The ship lurched as it began to engage the enemy fleet. Blasts of energy fire streaked through space, lighting up the dark expanse. Ethan's heart raced as the first of the Varkian ships entered the narrow passage between the asteroids. The enemy had taken the bait. Ethan could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, but he kept his focus. He activated the ship's special EMP device, a tool designed to jam enemy communications. The Varkians had no idea what hit them. Ships began to slow, their coordination falling apart as they scrambled to regain control. Now was the time. Leia and Ayla moved in quickly, firing on the Varkian command ship. Ethan's heart pounded as their weapons hit the mark, sending the alien ship into a spiral of flames and debris. The Varkians began to panic, and one by one, their ships turned to flee. The battle didn't last long after that. With their leadership destroyed, the rest of the Varkian fleet crumbled. The Emperor's daughters and Ethan had done the impossible. They had defeated the strongest enemy the Empire had ever faced. As the team returned to the palace, Ethan could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The Emperor's daughters, once skeptical of him, now looked at him with newfound respect. They had seen his strategy in action, and it had saved them all. You were right, Human Leia said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. Your plan worked. Allah smiled faintly. You proved us wrong. Nira, who had been the most skeptical of all, clapped him on the back. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you were with us. Ethan smiled, feeling a wave of pride wash over him. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. After the battle, Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment he had never experienced before. The mission had been a success, and the Varkian fleet had been defeated. As they returned to the palace, the Emperor's daughters, Leah, Ayla, and Nira, treated him with a level of respect he had never imagined. They saw him as more than just a human soldier. They saw him as an ally, someone who could make a real difference in their world. But even with the victory, Ethan knew the challenges weren't over. The Empire was vast, and there were many more tests to come. He could see it in the way the Emperor's daughters looked at him. There was a change in how they viewed him. But the gulf between them still felt wide. the emperor had called for, a celebration to mark their victory. The grand halls of the palace were filled with music, laughter, and the soft clinking of glasses. It was a rare moment of peace in an otherwise chaotic galaxy, and Ethan couldn't help but feel out of place in such a royal setting. He stood by a large window, looking out over the stars. His thoughts were a mix of pride and uncertainty. He had proven himself in battle, but was that enough? Could he ever truly belong in the Emperor's world? Liak approached him, her usual cold expression softened by a hint of admiration. "God, you've done something that none of us thought possible," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I've been wrong about you, Ethan?" Ethan turned to face her, surprised by the words. He had never expected to hear such praise from Leia. "I just did what needed to be done," he replied. "We all did our part." Leia nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Yes, but you were the one who saw the weakness in the Varkian strategy. You were the one who thought of a way to stop them when the rest of us were ready to fight head-on." "I learned from you," Ethan said, his voice humble. "You've all taught me more than I can ever repay." Leia studied him for a moment, then smiled. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile, and it warmed his heart. "We may not always agree, but you're not just a soldier, Ethan. You're something more." Before Ethan could respond, Ayla joined them. She, too, wore a look of respect. "The Empire could use more humans like you," she said with a nod. "The way you think, the way you act, it's different from the other species we've known. It's something new." Ethan felt a swell of pride at their words, but at the same time, he knew it wasn't enough. There was still something between them that neither words nor actions could completely erase. He wasn't one of them. He wasn't a royal, and he wasn't from their world. "Thank you," Ethan said. "But I know I have a long way to go before I can truly be one of you." Ala looked at him, her eyes sharp. "Don't sell yourself short," she said. "You've earned your place here. You've shown us that humans are more than just weaklings. We'll remember that." Just then, Nira appeared, her usual playful smile, replaced with a more serious expression. "We've all been talking," she said, glancing at her sisters. "And we've agreed on something." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Nira's smile returned, but it was different this time. Warmer, more genuine. "You've proven yourself to us, Ethan, and now we want to make sure you stay with us. The bond between us is stronger than just respect. You've earned a place in this family, and we want you to have it." Ethan was stunned by her words. He had always thought of them as distant, untouchable. But now, for the first time, they were offering him something he never imagined he would have a real place in their world. Leia stepped forward, her expression softening. "We may not be like humans in many ways, but we can understand the value of loyalty, of bravery, and of doing what's right. You've shown us all of those things." Ala nodded. "We've all decided that we want you by our side, Ethan. Not just as a soldier, but as someone who can lead with us, together." For the first time, Ethan felt like he truly belonged. There were no more doubts in his mind. The Emperor's daughters, once so distant and cold, were now offering him a place in their world. He was ready to take it. The days that followed were filled with new responsibilities and challenges. The Emperor had granted Ethan a position of honor, one that was far beyond his initial role as a soldier. He was now considered a part of the royal family, an unexpected turn of events for someone who had once been laughed at by the Emperor's daughters. Ethan spent the following weeks working closely with the daughters, helping them with their duties and learning from them. Leia taught him about leadership, Ala about strategy, and Nira about the delicate balance of politics. He was no longer just a human soldier who's becoming an integral part of the Empire's future. But despite the warmth he felt from the Emperor's daughters, there was still one person he had to win over: the Emperor himself. The Emperor had been silent for the most part, observing Ethan's progress, but never openly showing approval. Ethan knew he had earned the respect of the daughters. But the Emperor's approval was another matter entirely. One day, after a particularly long meeting with the Emperor's advisors, Ethan found himself face to face with the Emperor in the royal gardens. The Emperor stood with his back to Ethan, looking out over the vast landscape of the palace grounds. "You've impressed my daughters," the Emperor said, his voice deep and calm. but that doesn't mean you've earned my trust. Ethan stood taller, meeting the Emperor's gaze. I'll do whatever it takes to earn it. The Emperor turned to face him, his eyes hard but not unkind. You've proven yourself in battle, but there's more to being part of this family than just strength and strategy. You must understand the weight of leadership. The decisions we make affect not just us, but the entire galaxy. I understand, Ethan replied, his voice steady, and I'll never stop proving myself. The Emperor studied him for a moment, then nodded. But I believe you will. The days following Ethan's acceptance into the royal family were a whirlwind of training, meetings, and strategy sessions. He worked closely with Laia, Ayla, and Nira, helping them with everything from military planning to politics. The Empire was vast, and there was always something that needed their attention. But despite all the progress, one thing still lingered in Ethan's mind: the Emperor's approval. The Emperor had always been distant, his eyes watchful, but never warm. He had given Ethan a place at the table, but it was clear that he was still testing him. Ethan didn't know how to gain the Emperor's trust. He had earned the respect of the Emperor's daughters, but that was only part of the battle. The Emperor's word was final, and nothing was ever certain in his eyes. One evening, after a long day of working on the Empire's defense strategies, Ethan found himself in the royal gardens once again. The stars were bright above, and the soft breeze carried the scent of flowers. It was a peaceful night, but the tension inside Ethan was palpable. He could feel the weight of the Emperor's silence pressing down on him as he walked along the path. He noticed the Emperor standing alone by a large fountain. The Emperor's tall figure was silhouetted against the moonlight, and his crown seemed to glow with the weight of authority. Ethan hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach, but then decided to speak. "Your Majesty," Ethan said, bowing respectfully. The Emperor didn't turn at first, but his voice carried through the stillness of the garden. "You've earned the respect of my daughters, human," he said coldly. "But respect is not enough." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment that would either make or break his place in the Empire. "I know," Ethan replied, standing tall. "I want to prove myself to you, Your Majesty. I want to show you that I can help lead this empire." The Emperor finally turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "You think you can lead? You're human. You don't understand what it takes to lead an empire. This is not just about strategy or battle. This is about power, control, and loyalty. You have none of that." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had known that the Emperor didn't trust him, but to hear it so plainly stung. "I may not have been born into power," Ethan said quietly, "but I understand what it means to fight for something greater than myself. I understand loyalty. I've seen it in your daughters. I've seen it in the people of this empire. I can learn. I can lead." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, his gaze intense. "You think you can change things, human? You think you can lead alongside my daughters? You are nothing but a soldier, a tool to be used. That is all you will ever be." Ethan's fists clenched at his sides, but he didn't back down. "I'm more than just a soldier. I've proven that. I've fought beside your daughters. Helped win battles? I've helped save this empire. I'm not asking for your trust, Your Majesty. I'm earning it."
Right.
The Emperor's eyes darkened, and for a moment there was silence between them. The air felt thick with tension, and Ethan could almost hear his own heartbeat in the stillness. Finally, the Emperor spoke, his voice colder than ever. "You want to prove yourself? Then do it. Prove that you are worthy of being more than just a soldier. Prove that you belong here, in this family." Ethan didn't flinch at the Emperor's words. He nodded slowly. "I will, Your Majesty. I will prove it." The Emperor studied him for a moment longer, then turned away. "We shall see." He muttered, walking back toward the palace, his royal cloak trailing behind him. Ethan stood there, his mind racing. He knew that he had just been given another chance. But the Emperor's words had made one thing clear. The road ahead would be even harder than before. Earning the Emperor's trust was no easy feat, and Ethan couldn't afford to fail. Over the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into his work. The Emperor's challenge loomed over him, but he refused to let it break his spirit. He spent long hours strategizing with Isla, helping her develop new plans to secure the Empire's borders. He worked with Nira, learning the intricacies of court politics, and even helped Laia with her leadership duties. Offering new perspectives on old problems, despite the progress he made, the Emperor's disapproval still hung over him like a cloud. Every time Ethan looked up, he could see the Emperor's cold eyes watching from afar. Ethan knew that the Emperor was waiting for him to fail. It's waiting for him to prove that humans didn't belong in the royal family. But Ethan wasn't ready to give up. He had come too far to back down now. He had earned the respect of the Emperor's daughters, and he knew that, with time, he could earn the Emperor's respect too. Then, one day, an unexpected crisis struck the Empire. A new enemy-an alliance of hostile species had launched a surprise attack on the Empire's outer colonies. The enemy was vast and well-organized, and they struck with deadly force, leaving little room for the Empire's defenders to fight back. The Emperor, knowing that the situation was dire, called for a council of war. The Emperor's daughters were summoned, along with Ethan, to discuss the best course of action. As they gathered in the war room, the Emperor wasted no time. "The enemy is closing in on our colonies," he said. "We must strike back quickly, but we need a plan that will ensure victory." Ethan stood in the back of the room, watching the discussion unfold. The Emperor's daughters were all focused, each one offering suggestions and strategies, but Ethan's mind was working faster than ever. He knew the enemy's strengths and weaknesses. He knew that this battle could be won, but only if they used their resources wisely. After listening carefully to the discussion, Ethan stepped forward. "What if we don't fight them head-on?" he suggested. "We know they're strong in numbers, but their communication lines are weak. If we can disrupt their command, we can force them to scatter." The Emperor's daughters looked at him surprised. The Emperor, however, remained silent, watching him closely. "We'll use their own strength against them," Ethan continued. "Hit them where it hurts the most. Tat their leadership." The room fell quiet as the Emperor considered his words. Finally, he spoke. "You've got one chance, human. If this fails, there will be no second chances." Ethan nodded. "I understand, and I won't let you down." The battle for the Empire's colonies raged on. Ethan, standing beside the Emperor's daughters, watched the battlefield unfold with a mix of determination and nerves. The enemy was fierce, and their numbers seemed endless. But Ethan knew that, if they followed his plan, they had a real chance to turn the tide. The Emperor's fleet had engaged the enemy head-on, as expected, but their strength lay not in direct confrontation, but in taking out the enemy's command structure. The enemy's leadership was disorganized, and their communications were weak, just as Ethan had predicted. The key was to hit them where it would hurt most. Ethan stood at the center of the war room, watching the holographic displays as the battle continued to unfold. Ayla, Leah, and Nira were by his side, their eyes focused on the strategy in motion. Every move counted. If they made the wrong decision, the Empire could lose everything. "We're almost in position," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "Once we disrupt their command, we can scatter their forces." Laia nodded, her usual confidence returning. "The enemy won't know what hit them." The team had carefully planned the attack, using a series of smaller or agile ships to get behind enemy lines and strike at their command ship. With the enemy's communication lines disrupted, they wouldn't be able to call for reinforcements, and without their leader, they would fall apart. The problem was that the enemy command ship was heavily guarded, and getting close without being detected was their biggest challenge. Alla leaned over the map, studying the enemy's movements. "We can't afford to be detected," she said. "We need to time this perfectly." Ethan's mind raced as he examined the map. He knew this was the moment. If they pulled this off, the victory would be theirs. But it wasn't just about strategy. It was about trust, the Emperor, his daughters, and even the soldiers who fought alongside them. They all had to trust Ethan's plan. "Let's move out," Ethan said. "It's now or never." The fleet moved into position, silent and swift, cutting through the darkness of space. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as the enemy's massive, Command ship came into view. He was leading the charge, his heart steady, but his mind racing. Every detail needed to fall into place the moment they were within range. Ethan's team launched their attack, hitting the enemy's communications. Systems first. Sparks flew across the holographic display as the enemy's ships began to lose contact with each other. Chaos spread among the enemy ranks, and Ethan's squad moved in quickly. Targeting the command ship, a battle like this wasn't won with sheer strength. It was won by outsmarting the enemy, by using the environment and the situation to your advantage. Ethan's squad split into smaller groups, attacking from different directions. The enemy, already weakened by the loss of communication, was no match for their strategy. "We've got them on the run," Nira said, her voice filled with excitement. "Their ships are breaking apart." But Ethan didn't celebrate. He knew the battle wasn't over yet. The command ship was still intact, and if they didn't take it out soon, the enemy might regroup. "We need to finish this," Ethan said. Firmly, "Take out the command ship now." The Emperor's daughters led their forces, coordinating with precision as Ethan's plan unfolded before them. The command ship, once a symbol of the enemy's strength, was now surrounded. The final blow came from Ethan's squad, an energy blast aimed directly at the ship's core. It was a perfect shot. The enemy command ship erupted in a fiery explosion, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The remaining enemy ships, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat in panic. The victory was theirs. Back in the war room, the atmosphere was tense, but relieved. Ethan stood with the Emperor's daughters, watching the final moments of the battle play out on the holographic displays. The Emperor, usually so cold and distant, finally spoke. "You did it, human," he said, his voice deep and heavy with grudging respect. Ethan turned to face him, his heart still racing from the battle. "We did it together, Your Majesty. Your daughters led the way, and I just gave them a plan." The Emperor nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "You've proven yourself today. More than just a soldier. You've earned your place here." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. After all the training, the battles, and the doubt, he had finally earned the Emperor's respect. But it wasn't just the Emperor's approval that mattered. It was the respect of the daughters, the women he had fought beside, and learned from. It was their acceptance that meant more to him than anything. Leah stepped forward first. "You've earned our trust, Ethan," she said, her voice steady and sincere. "You've proven that humans have something to offer that we never expected." Allah smiled, her usual seriousness softened by genuine admiration. "We've all seen it. Your mind, your loyalty. You're more than just a soldier, you're a leader." Nira's grin was wide, her usual teasing tone replaced by something warmer. "I think it's time we all start thinking of you as one. Of us, you've more than earned it." Ethan's heart swelled with pride. They had seen something in him, something that he had been trying to show all along. And now, for the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. Not just as a human, not just as a soldier, but as someone who had earned a place by their side. Later that night, in the royal palace's grand hall, a celebration was held. The Emperor's daughters, Ethan, and the other leaders of the Empire gathered to mark the victory. There was laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses as the Empire's future seemed brighter than it had in years. Ethan stood with the Emperor's daughters, looking out over the gathered crowd. He'd come a long way from the soldier who had been laughed at by the Emperor's daughters. Now he was part of the family. Not just as a servant or soldier, but as someone who had helped lead them to victory. The Emperor, watching from a distance, had a rare look of approval in his eyes. For the first time, Ethan realized that his journey wasn't over. It had just begun. Together with the Emperor's daughters and the rest of the Empire, he would help build a new future, one where humans were no longer seen as weak but as equals. It was a future they would all shape together.